Hello, everyone, and welcome into Coach Craig's Sports. This is the MLB DFS Core Pick video, Core Pick live stream for today, Thursday, August 24th. If you have not joined me before in the past, first of all, welcome in. Second of all, this is kind of the structure that I do. So we're going to go over a recap of yesterday's picks, see how they ultimately ended up turning out. Then we're going to go over to RotoWire, take a look at the weather report for today, any games that could potentially be affected by rain or any other type of weather. And then we'll get over to FanDuel. We'll talk about my core 5 picks for today overall. It's going to be 1 pitcher, 4 hitters, combination of past history and recent history to make up those core 5 picks for today. It's a smaller slate today. I believe 5 games in total for the main slate. And then last but not least, we'll get over to the cheat sheet, the bottom half of that, and talk about my top GPP teams to stack for today overall. Going to be a short list today since we only do have those 5 games in totality, but should be a pretty interesting slate overall. Good slate to mix and match as always. So we're going to get started with a recap of yesterday's picks. At the pitcher position, we went with Aaron Savali at $9,700. Looked like a pretty good matchup for him versus Colorado. Unfortunately, only pitched 5 innings. Still pitched pretty well, though. Got 33 points, so it did ultimately end up giving him a push. We were trying to look for 36 or more out of him. Ended up being the 5th overall pitcher on yesterday's slate, so not anybody that killed us by any means. And then at second base, we had Jose Altuve at $4,100. Got to 15.2 points, so he was a hit as well. He was the 2nd overall second baseman. He was technically the 3rd if you count Isaac Paredes in that group. Speaking of Isaac Paredes, he was our replacement core pick since Basabe did not end up starting yesterday for the Tampa Bay Rays. He actually started at shortstop in his place, and he replaced him in our lineups as well. $3,100, got to 21.7, excuse me. So he was ahead. He ended up being the top overall first baseman, second baseman, or third baseman, just depending on where you ended up playing him. So really good day for him. Obviously did end up hitting a home run yesterday. And then we had his teammate Randy Arozarena at $3,500, got to 21.7 points. He had a home run as well, and he was the 6th overall outfielder on yesterday's slate. And then behind Alex at $3,000, got to 15.7 points, and was the 7th overall outfielder on yesterday's slate. So both them ultimately ended up being hits yesterday. Really good day hitting wise. If you got to Aaron Judge, who ultimately ended up hitting 3 home runs, was in the cheat sheet yesterday, probably had an even better day. Yesterday I was really between Charlie Morton and Aaron Savali for a pitcher position. So I said to get exposure to a couple of different ones, whether it was those two or I'm trying to remember who else was there, Jose Quintana. So if you got some exposure to Charlie Morton and Aaron Judge in the same lineup, along with some other core picks that ultimately ended up doing pretty well, probably had a really good day yesterday altogether. But with that being said, we're going to stop sharing the screen. We'll get over to RotoWire and take a look at that weather report for today. So let me get that brought up here as we're talking through it. And I am going to, looks like we're already on the right spot. So we're going to start off with Baltimore and Toronto. That game is out in Baltimore, 20% chance of rain. So that's just going to be one that we do only end up monitoring throughout the day. Although Baltimore does have a pretty strong history of not giving out. So not too really concerned about that. Pittsburgh and Chicago out in Pittsburgh. I do like the Cubs a lot in this spot, but about a 50% chance of rain at this point in time. In Minnesota, only 1% chance of rain versus Texas today. Chicago White Sox in Chicago versus the Oakland A's, 17% chance of rain. So that's another one we'll just monitor throughout the day. Although, the White Sox are pretty notable for having a good ground screw as well. And then Arizona and Cincinnati is in a dome. So we're not too worried about that. Majorly going to be looking at the Cubs and Pirates game, which is a little bit unfortunate since the Cubs are a team that I do like quite a bit. And they're going to be a lot in my core picks. So if that game ultimately does not end up going off, I'll leave it down in the comments below if anything majorly does change weather-wise, as well as those starting lineups throughout the day. But with that being said, we're going to stop sharing this screen. We'll get over to FanDuel and talk about my core picks for today overall. So just get FanDuel brought up here real quick as we're talking through it. I think it's a very interesting day at the pitcher position, probably a little bit better than yesterday, but, we're only looking at 5 games in totality. I think Justin Steele's in play. He's going to be my core pick. I think that both Jose Barrios and Kyle Gibson in that matchup have pretty strong upside. I think Andrew Heaney has some upside for the Twins, a team that does like to strike out quite a bit, a guy that has pretty good stuff, but has been known to give some long balls and everything else like that. And then we have Brandon Williamson down to $7,600. Had a decent start earlier this season versus Arizona. You can also throw Mario Kelly into the mix. Looks like he should be starting for the Diamondbacks today. So you're looking about, 5 or 6 guys that could be viable on this slate altogether. But when it comes to Justin Steele, it's pretty limited history against Pittsburgh. It's mostly good for the most part. Brian Hayes is like the one guy that's hit him pretty well in the past, 2 for 4 with a home run. Brian Reynolds does have a home run versus him as well, but only 2 for 7. So just keep that in mind as you're building out your lineups today. But do you think he has a really strong upside? He's had a really great season so far, $10,400, averaging about 35 fantasy points per game. This one's showing about 34, 14 wins in totality. So he's been winning quite a bit out there on the mound. So that is, free extra 6 points if he does ultimately end up getting the win once again. 2.8 ERA, and some pretty strong performances. And even the bad performances out of him this season haven't been too terribly bad outside of like this 8-point game, 12-point game there. But overall, been a pretty strong pitcher. And, going against Pittsburgh should be a pretty favorable matchup once again. The Pirates had a little bit of stretch this year where they look like a decent team. And kind of unfortunately, they fell apart. So lineup's not the strongest that it could be. I like the matchup for Justin Steele. When you're looking down the Pittsburgh lineup, probably a lineup that struggles a little bit more against left-handed pitching as well. Then we're going to move down to second baseman and Nico Horner at $3,600. It is expected, at least at this point in time, that Andrew Jackson does end up starting for the Pirates today. There's some reports early on that like it could be him, it could be Mitch Keller, but at least most sites are pointing towards Jackson at this point in time. If it's Keller, we might adjust these core picks just a little bit. Obviously, the weather plays a big factor in this game as well. But Nico Horner is 3 for 3 with 1 home run in his career versus Andre Jackson in his career, and he has at least 1 hit in 11 out of his last 14 games, 5 of those games being multi-hit games. Obviously, Nico Horner's had a really strong season, 277 average, 9 home runs, 61 RBIs, a guy that can steal base here and there as well. Just over 11.5 fantasy points per game at $3,600. You can play him at second base, you can play him at shortstop, but it looks like a really strong option today, and the Cubs are going to look like a pretty strong team to stack today, assuming Jackson gets the start for Pittsburgh and assuming this game ultimately does end up going off. Then we're going to move down to shortstop and Tim Anderson. He's only $2,500. It has not been the greatest season in the world for Tim Anderson. Obviously, most notably, he got in that fight with Jose Ramirez, but he's been struggling before that. He's kind of starting to pick it up back before that fight. Now he's been a little hit or miss since that time and everything else like that. Only the 240 average on the season. You were talking about a former batting champ at one point in time, only 1 home run, 22 RBIs, a guy that could steal a little bit of bases here and there, but a little bit banged up earlier in the year, so he wasn't running quite as much. 7 fantasy points per game essentially at this point in time, $2,500, pretty good value spot for him overall. Goes against lefty Ken Waldichuk for the Oakland A's today. We'll see if Waldichuk operates as kind of the primary pitcher in relief, because sometimes they've been known to throw an opener out there before him, or if he just ultimately ends up getting the start. So that would be some minor to monitor throughout the day. But do like Tim Anderson. He is a guy, like I said, has been a little bit more hit or miss as of late. So when you look at the game log, multi-hit game yesterday, then we had a couple offers. We had a couple games with hit in a row. Just kind of looking to piece it all together. Hopefully this is the game where he does it against Ken Waldichuk. Typically, this White Sox lineup is a lineup that typically it's left-handed pitching pretty well, going back years and years at this point in time. But a lot of these players have been around, for about 3 years at this point. So Tim Anderson, typically one of those guys as well. Then we're going to move down to the outfield. We got Ian Happ at $3,200, averaging just over 10 fantasy points per game. It's only a 238 average of 14 home runs, 58 RBI. So a decent season for him. Kind of slowed down a little bit as of late. He's one of those guys that tends to be pretty streaky. And he is 2 for 4 with 1 home run versus Andre Jackson in his career. If you look at if Mitch Keller ultimately ends up getting the start, he's like 7 for 16 with 1 or 2 home runs versus him too as well. So either way, Ian Happ looks like a really strong play today, as long as this game ultimately does end up going off. He has at least 1 hit in 7 out of his last 8 games. So some pretty strong history as of late. A guy that I would consider very much so today, especially as you're building out some Cubs stacks just in general. And then last but not least, name we probably haven't talked too much about this year, but it's Dalton Varsho. I know he's been in the Core Picks one time before, and he actually paid off pretty well in that game too. So it's only a 222 average at this point in time, 16 home runs, 47 RBIs, a guy that can steal base here and there as well. Averaging just over 8 fantasy points per game, $2,600, pretty decent value spot at this point in time. Goes against Kyle Gibson. Kyle Gibson's kind of this weird one today where sometimes against the Blue Jays hasn't done too well, but this year he's been pretty good against them. Dalton Varsho, 4 for 11 with 1 home run versus him. Kind of been on some of that strong upside today at a cheap price of $2,600. He's got at least 1 hit in 5 out of his last 6 games. So really starting to right the ship once again for him. Obviously a guy that never going to be crazy with that batting average, but offers a little bit of power, offers a little bit of speed at a cheap price tag of $2,600. And like I said, 5 out of the last 6 games he's got a hit. And 2 of those games were multi-hit games. He's got 2 home runs during that stretch as well. So showing a little bit more as of late, a decent history in the past versus Kyle Gibson. So I will take advantage of that today. But with that being said, if you go with these 5 players that I do have listed here, you'll have $12,700 remaining, just under $3,200 per player. So a little bit of room to spend up. It's something you ultimately want to do. There's not a ton of spend up options today, just in general, especially if you're paying down a little bit more a pitcher. But, it's the day that you can probably leave a little bit of money on the table if that's something you really want to do. Get creative with some of your stacks, get creative with some of those pitchers that we are throwing out there today, just in general. But with that being said, we're going to get over to the YouTube community tab and my cheat sheet and talk about the top GPP teams to stack today overall. So, like I said, it's only a 5-game main slate, so it's not going to be a long list of teams today. So, let me just scroll down here real quick as we're moving through it. You can guess that the Cubs are already on this list, going against Andre Jackson most likely today. If not, Mitch Keller. If it's Mitch Keller, maybe tune back the Cubs just a little bit more, but some of them have hit him pretty well in the past. I think if it's Mitch Keller, we're more likely to play Dansby Swanson, who's been all right as of late, and he's got a pretty decent history versus Mitch Keller in the past as well. I like the White Sox going against Ken Waldichuk. There is no history there whatsoever. The White Sox typically a team that does hit left-handed pitching better, so they are on my radar very much so today, whether it's Tim Anderson, Eloy Jimenez, Luis Robert, and Andrew Vaughn. Andrew Vaughn's typically one that hits left-handed pitching pretty well as well. And then last but not least, we got the Blue Jays there. Like I said, Kyle Gibson, very much hit or miss versus this Blue Jays team in the past. The 2 starts this year have been pretty good. In the past, you go back to last year, you only had 3 fantasy points in that start against them. So kind of which one's going to win out. You could look at some of the Baltimore hitters against Jose Barrios. Barrios has pitched pretty good against them the last 2 years, though. So it's kind of a little bit of hit or miss there once again. But, you're going to get a little bit creative with some of these stacks today. If you want to go after Texas against Pablo Lopez, could make some sense. Not a long list history there. Aldolis Garcia 2 for 3 with a home run versus him. A couple other guys like 1 for 2, 1 for 3, but it's still a little bit of a chance to take today overall. So get creative with those stacks. Get creative with the pitchers that you're playing today. If you guys have any questions whatsoever, be sure to drop them down in the comments and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. Be sure to let me Also, be sure to let me know your favorite play on today's slate. Maybe it's someone from my core 5 picks. Maybe it's someone from my top GPP stacks. Small chance that it's somebody that was not a part of either one of those, but definitely be sure to let me know if it is, because I'm definitely interested in what you guys have to say. And then with that being said, once again, if anything majorly changes weather-wise, there's a couple games that we'll be watching throughout the day. We're looking at 3 games throughout the day on a 5-game slate. So it's going to make a pretty important role for this slate overall. So we'll update that down in the comments. We'll have the starting lineups down there as well. And then, like I said, if you guys have any questions whatsoever, be sure to let me know down there or on Twitter at Coach Craig Sport, and be more than happy to help you as well. But with that being said, that's pretty much what I do have at this point in time. If you are checking my channel out for the very first time or have yet to subscribe, please consider doing so. Definitely would appreciate it. Helps to build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports, which is one that's truly for you, the viewers, helping you with your DFS primarily. Right now it is MLB DFS Monday through Friday. We got CFL DFS going up once a week, typically on Wednesdays. That video went up yesterday. If that's something you're interested in over on the DraftKings side, be sure to check that out as well. NFL is coming right around the corner. So once we get into the NFL regular season, we'll be doing some DFS content for that as well. But with that being said, that's all that I truly have at this point in time. Definitely do appreciate each and every one of you tuning in, whether you're watching live or on replay. Definitely means a lot to me. I hope that each and every one of you have a great rest of your day and some pretty good luck in MLB DFS tonight.